There is no floor, there is no ceiling, there is no light. You don't know if you're alive or dead, and that distinction stopped mattering how long ago. You've lost count. The smell has no name in any language you know. Digested flesh, acid, rotten sea, darkness with a scent. Every breath comes in warm and leaves worse. The walls around you contract as if whatever swallowed you is still trying to decide what to do with you. You are inside the belly of something that is still moving. You feel it, the slow swaying, the deep rumbling from below, the sea surrounding everything. You are inside something that is inside the ocean, and the ocean is inside the will of someone you tried to escape. 3 days, or thereabouts. You're not sure of anything anymore, but there is one thing you are sure of, and it is that certainty that brought you here, not fear. Fear would have sent you to Nineveh without complaint. What brought you inside this creature was knowing too much about what would come after you obeyed. You knew the God who sent you. You had known him for years. And it is precisely because of that you walked in the opposite direction. But that is not the beginning. To understand what is weighing on your mind now, inside something that doesn't even have a proper name, the Hebrew text calls it Dag Gadol, great fish, nothing more, as if the name didn't matter. You need to understand who Jonah was before he became the man who tried to flee a divine order. Not out of cowardice, out of conviction. You grew up in Gath Hepher, a small place, a village among limestone rocks and olive trees in northern Galilee, 5 kilometers northeast of a city that, centuries later, the world would call Nazareth. In Hebrew, Gath Hepher means something like wine press of the pit, an ugly name for a small place that appeared on no important map. You are the son of Amittai. Amittai means my truth, son of truth, and that inheritance weighed on you your whole life. You learned early that truth is not comfortable, that truth divides, that truth demands a position. And your position was always the same: Israel first, Israel above all, not out of blind arrogance, but out of history, out of blood, out of generation upon generation of a people that survived the desert, the pharaohs, the judges, the wars, the internal betrayals, and who now stood upright under the reign of Jeroboam II in a rare period of expansion and relative peace. You had prophesied that period. It is written in the 2nd book of Kings, chapter 14. Jonah, son of Amittai, prophesied that Israel would recover its territories, and so it happened. You were the right prophet at the right moment, and the people knew your name in a good way. You carried reputation. You carried the weight of fulfilled words, and you also carried what every person who sees far carries, the weight of what comes next. Because to the east, less than 1,300 kilometers away, Nineveh was waking up. You knew what Assyria was. Every Israelite knew. The accounts came in waves on caravans, in the mouths of fugitives, in the scars of survivors, not as rumor, as inventory. The Assyrian kings documented their own cruelties with pride. They recorded them in stone reliefs on palace walls. They left it carved for posterity like someone signing a job well done. They decapitated entire armies and built pyramids of skulls at the entrance of conquered cities, like road signs. They impaled prisoners along access routes as permanent decoration. They gouged out the eyes of captured warriors. They scalped people alive. They placed iron hooks in the noses of captives and tied them in a line with rope, pulling through flesh, kilometers at a stretch, taking them wherever they wished. And the kings who ordered this done had no shame. They had pride. They had what they did carved on palace walls. I destroyed, I devastated, I burned. Written in stone, forever. That was the enemy to the east, and Nineveh was the head of that body. When the word of God came to you for the first time with that name, Nineveh, you immediately understood what it meant, and you understood why a cold crept in that had nothing to do with temperature. The order was direct. Arise, Go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." Simple, clear, no room for interpretation. The voice of God does not come in the format of a debate. It does not open space for counter-argument, only instruction. But you knew that voice. You had known it for a long time. You knew the character of the one speaking, and that is precisely where the problem began. You were not afraid to go to Nineveh. It was not fear. It was something worse than fear. It was certainty. You knew what would happen if you went, because you knew God. Not as a concept, not as doctrine, not as memorized text. The way you know someone up close, with all the consistencies and contradictions that implies. You knew God was merciful, slow to anger, full of loyal love, ready to relent from calamity when the people repented. You knew this before even taking one step toward Nineveh, and what you knew was destroying you from the inside, because the logic was simple and brutal. If you went and preached, Nineveh would repent. If Nineveh repented, God would forgive. If God forgave, Nineveh would survive. And if Nineveh survived, in less than 50 years, those same men who built pyramids of skulls would come to destroy Israel. You knew. You already felt it. You were a prophet, and you had been sent to be the instrument of salvation for your people's executioner. Not out of cowardice did you walk toward Joppa. Out of calculation, out of love for Israel, out of a conviction that seemed more reasonable than obeying an order that felt like suicide for the entire nation. Joppa was a port on the Mediterranean, the city that today would be Jaffa, beside Tel Aviv. You went down there. There was a ship bound for Tarshish. Tarshish was the opposite extreme. The end of the known world for anyone living in the Middle East in the 8th century before Christ, probably somewhere on the Iberian Peninsula. What would today be southern Spain? You were going to the farthest possible direction from where you had been sent. You paid your fare with what you had, you boarded, and you went down into the hold of the ship, and you slept. Not like someone with a clear conscience, but like someone who has made a decision, closed the account, and no longer wants to think about what they left behind. The decision was made. The ship was moving. The distance was growing. There was nothing left to do but let it grow. The sailors working on the deck above you were not Israelites. They were Phoenicians, most likely. Sea people. People who had known the Mediterranean since they learned to walk, who could read the wind by the color of the foam, who had seen real storms many times. But not this one. The storm that came was not normal, and they realized it quickly. Each sailor prayed to his own god. They threw cargo into the sea to lighten the hull. The timber groaned, the sails tore, and you slept in the hold. The captain of the ship came down to where you were. He shook you. Arise, call upon your God. Perhaps God will give a thought to us so that we may not perish. You went up. You looked at the sea. You recognized what it was. This was not meteorology. It was a response, and you knew where it was coming from. The sailors cast lots to find out who had brought disaster upon the ship. An ancient technique, common, practical. The lot fell on you. They asked who you were, where you came from, what you had done, and you told them everything. I am a Hebrew. I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. I was fleeing from him. That is what you said. You did not try to hide it. You did not invent a story. The truth came out, simple and heavy as stone. They were seized with a different fear than the fear of the storm. A fear that goes by another name, reverence. Throw me into the sea. You said this with clarity, and it was the clearest thing you had said in days. Throw me into the sea, and the storm will calm. The sailors tried to row. They tried in earnest. They fought for the ship. But the sea only grew fiercer. And so they asked forgiveness from the God of Jonah, from the God they had never worshipped, and they threw you into the sea. The cold came before anything else. The Mediterranean Sea in the middle of a storm at night in the 8th century before Christ. The shock of the impact, the immediate engulfing, the waves above pushing you down, the light disappearing, the pressure growing in your ears. Seaweed wrapping around your neck like ropes. You went down. The seafloor has no visible bottom when you sink into it at night during a storm. There is only darkness that grows denser. And then the mouth opened. The suction. The dark swallowed the dark. You don't know how much time passed before you understood that you were still alive. Alive is the wrong word. You were inside something that was alive, and that difference is the difference between having control and having none at all. The walls moved, warm, wet, elastic under your fingers when you tried to orient yourself. The smell was of depth, of internal organs, of processed sea, of darkness with texture. At times there was a faint blue light coming from nowhere in particular, bioluminescence from something the creature had swallowed before you, like a ghost of clarity, like the vision of someone nearly extinguished. 3 days, 3 nights. You could not stand upright. The space was not made for that. You existed in the space left over between digestion and forgetting, and it was there, inside that thing, that you prayed. Not because you had a choice, because you had nothing left. There is a difference between praying when everything is going well and praying when you have no options left. The second is not virtue. It is survival instinct that found the only address that still made sense. When you strip away everything a person has, the ground beneath their feet, the light, the control, the plan, the conviction that they know better than whoever is in charge, what remains is the voice they still recognize. You had recognized that voice for years. From the depths of the pit I called to you. From the belly of Sheol I cried out. You heard me. That is what you said. You prayed from inside the fish to the God you were fleeing, and the irony did not escape you. There is no escaping irony when you are in the dark inside a creature at the bottom of the sea. You were asking to be saved from inside a situation God had created to stop you, asking to be returned to dry land, to do what you had refused to do. The prayer was real, the surrender was real, but the heart beneath the prayer had not changed completely. You still knew what would come after Nineveh. You still believed your reading of the situation was more reasonable than God's. But the body spoke louder than the conviction. And on the 3rd day, the fish vomited you onto the shore, smelling of what you had been immersed in, covered in bile and stomach acid, alive, disoriented, not knowing exactly where you were or in which direction lay whatever was now supposed to come next. The sunlight that hit your eyes was the most brutal thing you had felt in 3 days. It took time before you could see without everything flooding into white, but the order came again. The same order, word for word. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message I tell you. This time you went. Not necessarily because you had changed your mind about everything, but because you had run out of concrete alternatives. And sometimes that is what obedience looks like, not illumination, the exhaustion of options. Nineveh lay to the north and east, far to the east. You crossed over, weeks of travel. Every step to the northeast was a step toward the greatest historical enemy of your people. You passed through regions Israel had already lost. You went through places bearing visible marks of what Assyria did to those who resisted. You arrived at Nineveh, and the city was everything you knew it to be. Vast. The texts say it took 3 days to traverse the entire administrative district, a city measured in days of walking. You entered at the edge and began to walk. You prepared no sermon. You studied no audience. You devised no communication strategy. You made no attempt to build empathy with the people being warned. You walked and said one sentence, the same sentence. 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. Just that. No explanation of why, no explicit call to repentance, no sermon structure, the bare minimum. Part of you hoped it would not be enough, that they would ignore it, that they would confirm what you needed them to be. People who don't listen. The people of Nineveh believed. Immediately. Without resistance, without debate, without demanding credentials. They proclaimed a fast. They put on sackcloth, from the greatest to the least. The news reached the king. The king of Nineveh rose from his throne. He removed his royal robe. He covered himself with sackcloth. He sat down in ashes, and he issued a decree. Let no one eat or drink, neither people nor animals. Let everyone call out urgently to God. Let each one turn from their evil way. The most brutal city in the ancient world, prostrate before the God of a small people from a region they could have wiped off the map without great effort, humiliated, on their knees, because a reluctant prophet walked in and said one sentence he didn't even want to say. God saw, and he relented from the calamity he had said he would bring. Nineveh was not destroyed, and you became furious. An anger that seemed to you just technical, well-founded. You were so enraged that you asked to die. That is what you said. Take my life from me. It is better for me to die than to live. You said directly to God, I knew it. I knew this would happen. This is why I fled to Tarshish, because I know that you are gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and one who relents from sending calamity. I knew, and it happened. Now do what truly needs to be done. Take my life, because to live and see Nineveh standing is not life for me. The prophet who had preached the salvation of an enemy people was furious at having saved an enemy people and asking to die because of it. God asked only, "Is it right for you to be so angry?" You did not answer. You left the city. You built a shelter just outside with whatever you could find. You sat down, waiting to see if perhaps God would change his mind yet. If perhaps Nineveh would return to its evil ways quickly enough to deserve judgment before the 40 days were up. God made a plant grow, a large plant with broad leaves that cast shade over your head. And the narrative says something strange. It says, you were very glad about the plant, a happiness out of proportion to what was happening. The man who had asked to die was very glad about a leaf, because sometimes physical relief is more immediate than the anguish of conviction. The heat passed, the shade was real, and for a moment the internal weight became lighter than the temperature. Then, early in the morning, God appointed a worm. The worm attacked the root of the plant. The plant withered. The sun rose with greater intensity than the day before. A scorching east wind blew straight against your forehead. You were sitting under the sun without shade, dehydrated, on the edge of a city that should have been destroyed and wasn't, and again you asked to die. To the point of wanting to die, you said, for the second time. God asked again, "Is it right for you to be so angry about the plant?" And you answered without hesitation, "It is," to the point of wanting to die. And then God said the thing that closes the book. Without announcing it was the last line, without leaving room for a response. You had compassion on the plant, for which you did not labor, and which you did not cause to grow, which appeared in a night and perished in a night. And should I not have compassion on Nineveh, that great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also many animals? The book ends there, with a question, with no recorded answer. The story of the only prophet who was sent to preach directly to Gentiles, who was swallowed alive by something that was still moving, who came back, who preached the bare minimum, who saved the most brutal city of antiquity and was furious about it. That story ends without you knowing whether Jonah answered. whether he finally understood, whether he accepted God's logic or not, whether he sat there until the sun went down or stood up and walked away. The text does not say, and that absence is the answer the text chose to give. Because some understandings take more than one experience inside a fish. Because sometimes you can be technically obeying and still be furious underneath. Because sometimes you can have done the right thing for the wrong reasons and never fully settle that internal account. Jonah, son of Amittai, son of truth, whose very name in Hebrew means dove. The dove that fled to the opposite end of the mission was swallowed, came back, preached the minimum, saved a nation he hated, and sat in the sun waiting for everything to perhaps collapse in the right way. He was not wrong about the facts. Assyria would destroy the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 before Christ, about 30 years after the life of Jonah. The city he saved did what he feared. Nineveh survived, and Israel paid. The facts were on Jonah's side, only the right to decide was not. And that is the most costly distance that exists, knowing the truth about someone and still not having the right to decree their destiny. It is the difference between prophet and judge. Jonah wanted to be both. You wanted to be both. You sat there, with God's question hanging in the air, without answering. Perhaps because you didn't know, perhaps because you knew and didn't want to admit it. The flight does not begin when you put your foot on the ship. It begins when you understand the order, calculate the consequences, decide that your reading of the situation is more reasonable than obedience, and start walking down the stairs toward the port. The rest is just logistics. And the logistics end at the bottom of the sea, inside something that is still moving. If you want to understand what happens when someone is born who did not ask to be different from everyone else, who did not ask for the strength they carry, who did not ask for the calling that was placed on them, and who pays a price no one disclosed in advance, subscribe to the channel, because this is just getting started. Next video. POV: you are Samson, born for a war he didn't choose, destroyed by the only secret he could not keep.